Okay, Erev Tov, everyone. So on Tuesdays we talk about Tefillah Tuesdays. So let's continue where we were last week. We're learning Sharim Tefillah of Rav Pinkus. The truth is, last week it wasn't recorded, but I ended up saying something which could be construed as controversial. It was not my intention, but maybe let's start from there. So, we're talking about tefillah, talking about the different types of tefillah. It's very interesting. By the way, this whole sefer, as we've discussed, is based on the Midrashim. One has 10 different types and one has 13 different types, different words for tefillah. You can tell a lot about a culture based on their language. And based on in different cultures, different languages have got many different words for the same concept. So in English, right? In English, you call snow, snow. But for the Eskimos, it's been claimed they have hundreds of words. That's probably an exaggeration, but they have many different words for different types of snow. In classical Arabic, there are hundreds of different words for different types of camels, because that was something which was very important in the culture. And you have different sizes and different shapes and different colors, whatever it is. In Scotland, they have many different words for rain, different types of rain, and you can work out why. In Israel, we don't have many different words for rain. But rain. In Hawaii, they have different words for waves, and so on and so forth. It goes. So in Hebrew, in biblical Hebrew, we have many different words for tefillah, for prayer, different types of prayer, different forms, different types of emotion, different types of words that we use, different ways. Right? And each one has a different purpose. So one of the difficulties, so we try and translate it, that we don't have the vocabulary in English, but we can explain and we can talk about what the different types of tefillah are and what they encompass. Now, as we're learning this, obviously the purpose is to try and improve our tefillah and to try and improve our kavanah. And this is where it got controversial, because it doesn't mean that if you follow the steps in this book and you improve and you have perfect kavanah in your tefillah, that you will necessarily automatically get whatever you wish for, whatever you ask for, and that your tefillah will be answered in that way. No, that's not the intention. That's not the works. Huh? It works. That it works. Well, what does it mean that it works? That's the question, right? And so it doesn't mean everything will necessarily be answered. So you might say, well, what's the point? What's it all about? So I would say, remember that on the one hand, when we have tefillah, at least one form of tefillah is request. Not every form of tefillah is request. As we've said, there is tefillah which is praise, there is tefillah which is thanksgiving, but even the tefillah that is bakasha, and that is asking for things. So on one hand, we are asking for things, but on the other hand, by praying, we are fulfilling a mitzvah. According to some opinions, in certain circumstances, if not a mitzvah in the formal sense, it's certainly Ratzon HaTorah, what Hashem wants us to be doing. And just like with any other mitzvah, we want to know the details and the pratim and the halachot in terms of how to fulfill it in the proper way. When it comes to Arba Minim, you want to know that you have a kosher lulav. You want to know you're holding it the right way, you're shaking it the right way. When you're blowing the shofar, you want to know you have tefillin. Whatever mitzvah we're fulfilling, we want to fulfill it in the proper way. Is that because so that we'll immediately get some magical reward from heaven? Not necessarily. Not necessarily. Obviously, there's reward, and if you fulfill a mitzvah in the proper way, you'll get more reward, etc. But we're doing it because that's the way we're meant to. Tefillah is called avodah shebalev. It's service of the heart. So we aren't just with other mitzvot. There are certain mitzvot where we use our hands, and certain mitzvot we use our feet, and certain mitzvot we use our mouths, and certain mitzvot we use our brain, Talmud Torah. So it comes to mitzvah of tefillah. We use our heart in that way, in that sense, and to have the right kavanah. So there's value in understanding and appreciating what kavanah we're meant to have, even if it doesn't mean that it's necessarily going to be answered in the way that we want. The question is, does tefillah work? Right? Well, what does that mean? Does tefillah work? What's going to be the outcome? But that's one of the things we'll talk about. So he writes here, Rav Pinkus, we just started off this paragraph last time, but it wasn't on the recording. He says the first thing to know, this is still the introductory chapters of the book. He says one should know that tefillah is a fundamental, it's a foundation of the world, and our success in a lot of things, again, the whole introduction I gave notwithstanding, but our success in many arenas is dependent on tefillah. Just as limud Torah is one of the pillars of the world, so too is tefillah. It's a pillar in building up a person and the world. in the mashal, just like in the body, you have different limbs, and there are limbs that you could live without, right? And there are those that you cannot live without. Tefillah is something that we cannot live without. Whether it is part of our avodah, part of our service, whether it's part of the success a person may achieve in his life, physically, spiritually, hakol over derech avodat hatfilah, ve'ef shal hasik et tzorkeinu b'chayim biladeh. We need tefillah is a crucial component. So we quote here the Gemara Nida. Gemara Nida Daf Ayin says the following. Here we only have part of the Gemara that's quoted, but it says, Ma yaseh adam v'yechkam. What should a person do? A person wants to become wise. A person wants to study, wants to become a Talmid Chacham. What do you do? What is a person v'yashir? Or a person wants to become wealthy. A person wants to be a banim schayim. A person wants to have children. These are the three examples the Gemara gives. Now, in each of these cases, the Gemara says there are two parts to it. You have to, first of all, you have to put in the effort. You have to put in the work. You have to do the hishtadlut. If you never open a sefer, you're never going to become chacham. It won't work. It doesn't matter how much you daven, right? Remember, I heard a story once. Shechter told that he went to, I think it was that he was by the stipler, and he went to buy a sefer from him and certain things, and he asked him for a bracha. He asked him for a bracha to become a Talmid Chacham. And he said the stipler got very, very angry with him. He said, there's no bracha. He asked for a bracha for tzlacha in limud, success in learning. The stipler said, there's no bracha for success in learning. You want to have success in learning, go and open the sefer. And Rav Shechter listened, right? And he achieved that success. But so on the one hand, you have to do that. You have to put in the effort. But that's only half of it. Because the Gemara continues, it says, in all these cases, alongside that which you have to do, that's not enough. Yivakesh rachamim mimish hachokma v'osher banim shelo. So you have to ask rachamim, you have to ask for mercy. In other words, you have to daven. Why these three? We can talk about why specifically these three things. But it talks about chokhmah, about wisdom, about wealth, and about children. All these things is not enough. And the Gemara concludes, zeh below zeh lo sagir. It's not enough to do one without the other. Right, so it depends where you want to put the focus, but you have to put in the effort. That's offered. If you're just going to daven, you won't achieve it. But if you're just going to put in the effort and you're not going to daven at all, so also that's not enough. Okay, so I'd come the Gemara. Continues Rav Pinkus. He says that's ordinary things, right? That's in the ordinary course of life. All the more so when it comes to an Eitz Sarah, when we find ourselves in times of distress, be it personal, communal, national, global distress. So then we have to cry out. Then we have tefillah. There's a famous machloket, the way it's presented, between the Rambam and the Ramban in terms of what is the obligation of tefillah. Is there a mitzvah? Is tefillah one of the 613 mitzvot? Right? And there are those who say that tefillah is a mitzvah, and there are those who say tefillah is only a mitzvah in a time of tzara, in a time of distress. But everybody agrees that if there is a time of tzara, so then you have a positive mitzvah of tefillah. So without tefillah, we wouldn't be able to get out of it. עניין התפילה הוא, כי מן הסתרים שסדרה החוכמה העליונה הוא, שלהיות הנבראים מקבלים שפע ממנו יתברך, צריך שיתעוררו הם אליו ויתקרבו לו ויבקשו פניו. Writes the Ramchal. He says, Hashem created the world in such a way that there is shefa, there is bracha, there is blessing, there is whatever to give us that comes from Shamayim. And in order to get that, in order to receive it, part of what we have to do is we have to turn towards Him and we have to pray. Without that hitorut, without that awakening, without that tefillah, it won't come. Again, the way the world works, the way heaven works is extremely complex. It's beyond what we can understand. It's not a one-to-one thing. There are other factors, and there are many things going on. Does this mean that if you listen to the shiur and afterwards you've done the best maariv in your life, you'll go home and you'll become a millionaire immediately? No, that's not what it means, right? But this is part of this is what's brought into the world. You know, sometimes people say, right, how does tefillah work? Why should tefillah work? I'm asking God for something. He doesn't know what I want. I have to tell him. I have to change his mind. Obviously, we have these, all these childish ideas, but it's far more sophisticated than that. Why he's not explaining to us why this is, But the Ramchal says this is the way the world was set up. There is something called tefillah, and that is part of the function. That's part of the way that Hashem created the world. That's what he wants us to. So he explains. And ultimately, there are two pathways. There are two understandings in terms of how, asking for something from heaven through tefillah, how that should cause us to receive that shefa and that blessing. So one way is, I'll just say it outside without reading every word, but one way is that sometimes, we mentioned this last time, that a person is not worthy, a person is not deserving of a certain matter, and it's only if you come and you ask Hashem, then maybe through the tefillah you became deserving, the tefillah elevated you, brought you closer, and therefore you're able to receive that, whatever it is. But the second point, and this is the whole chidush Aviyah, that sometimes the person is deserving, and we should get it, but the tefillah is like the gateway. It's like if you have a house, you have something inside which is yours. But if you don't open the door, you'll never be able to access it. So tefillah is like opening the door and being able to access that as well. He then quotes, I think somebody mentioned this to me after the show last week, but he quotes where is this learned from? So this is learned from in Parashat Bereshit, in the story of creation, where it says, "V'kol siach hasadeh telem yeba'aretz v'kol eshev hasadeh telem yitzmach ki lo imtir Hashem Elokim ha'aretz v'adam ein la'avod et ha'adama." That the plants did not begin to grow, right? Because the plants hadn't grown yet. There was no rain, and there was no man to go and to work the land. So it says la'avod et ha'adama. And Rashi explains, what does it mean? Right? Why was there not yet rain? There was no man on earth, no human on earth, in order to recognize the goodness of the rains and to go and pray for it. And then man came and man prayed for the rain. That was when it began, and that was when the trees and the plants and everything began to sprout, etc. Okay, the Gemara discusses, there's a lot more, there's a lot of depth here behind this idea. But the point is that tefillah sometimes is the gateway. Meaning, and sometimes it's not that, you deserve it, you already have, you're already worthy of receiving whatever bracha and whatever blessings it may be, but without asking for it, without having that tefillah, then we won't receive it. So we can understand a little bit about the power of tefillah, which HaKadosh Baruch Hu implanted, and that is the way that he set up the world. Rabbi Chananya ben Akasha, HaKadosh Baruch Hu